there are only two ways you can lose your permanent resident status. One of them is if you sign a form called I-407, Abandonment of Permanent Residence, and you submit it to Customs and Border Protection, or you mail it to USCIS. The second way is if an immigration judge signs a deportation order. If neither of those two things have happened, you are probably still a permanent resident. Hey guys, welcome back. I recently had a situation where a client calls me because her mother, who is in her 80s and is a permanent resident, spent 4 years outside of the US. And the story was kind of something like this. My mother was outside of the US initially. Her plan was to come back within 6 months, but that got extended because she had a health problem. And then after that, COVID happened. And then after that, her green card just expired and she didn't know she could even come back to the US. After 4 years, with an expired green card, she applied for a tourist visa and just came back to the US as a tourist. And all sorts of alarm flags went off when I heard this. And what I told her next was kind of shocking. What I said is, did you know that your mother is still actually a permanent resident? And she was shocked to hear this. The general rule for maintaining your permanent resident status is if you leave the US for more than 1 consecutive year, you have abandoned your permanent residence. But that's not a hard and fast rule. I've seen people come back years later and Customs and Border Protection will just admit them as permanent residents without giving them a hard time. There are a couple things to keep in mind. First of all, if you are permitted back into the US and Customs and Border Protection doesn't give you a hard time, you need to speak with an immigration lawyer if you ever decide to apply for citizenship. Because when you apply to naturalize and become a US citizen, there's a good chance this abandonment issue can be raised, and then you can be placed into removal proceedings where an immigration judge might eventually sign a deportation order. The second thing to keep in mind is if you're entering and Customs and Border Protection brings up the fact that you left the US for more than 1 year, what they will often do is bring you into a back room. It's called secondary inspection, where they will interview you. And the purpose of this interview is to determine whether you intended to spend 1 year outside the US, or whether it was through circumstances that may have been outside of your control. The main thing to keep in mind is that there's a good chance they will pressure you into signing Form I-407 to abandon your permanent residence. If you actually sign that form, you've done their job for them. And they might even say things like, hey, it'll be easy for you to get your green card after you sign this. This is the right thing to do. You should generally not sign that form until you speak with your attorney. If you refuse to sign that form, they will typically admit you into the US. Admit is actually the wrong word. They will allow you to enter the United States, and they might give you a notice to appear in immigration court, where the immigration judge will hear your case to see what your intention was. This type of case is all about intent. The question becomes, did you intend to spend 1 consecutive year outside of the US? There's actually a case of an Iranian who went back to Iran once for a grandfather's funeral, and while in Iran was detained and arrested and incarcerated for 5 years by the Iranian authorities. And when they came back, Customs and Border Protection tried to take away their green card, but the person refused to sign an I-407 and was referred to immigration court. While in immigration court, the judge determined that it was not their intention to spend more than 1 year outside of the US, and therefore the green card was not abandoned, and the person continues to be a permanent resident. One final point to keep in mind is after you've re-entered the US, For example, in the case of the elderly woman I gave as I started this video, even though she entered as a tourist, which arguably might create other problems, especially if she lied to get the tourist visa, you can still actually renew your green card by filing Form I-90, and that's actually what I advised her to do. Just file Form I-90, but if you want to travel outside of the US in the future, that might not be a great idea. And if you want to apply for citizenship in the future, that also might not be advisable. But for now, you can renew your green card because if you recall, I said her green card had expired. So she's actually applying to renew it right now, and I fully expect for her to get a renewed green card in the mail. If there's one thing you took away from this video, it's that these abandonment of residency situations are highly fact specific. So if you're dealing with a situation like this, you really need to speak with an immigration attorney. I get calls all the time from people who have been outside of the US for a while, 2 to 5 years, and they want to create a plan for coming back to the US. So if you have any questions like that, be sure to contact me. I would be happy to assist you with any type of issue like that. All right, guys, that brings us to the end of today's video. If you have any specific questions about this topic or any immigration topic, put it in the comments below. I'll try my best to answer them within 1 week of the video being posted. If you're new to my channel, be sure to subscribe. I put out a new video on an immigration topic on a weekly basis, and I'll see you guys next week for another video.